Hello there folks, I'm Dan Brown from asortofinterestinglife.com. You're joining me on board good old Narrowboat Tilly, and today we're going to have a look back at my boat costs for last year, which was a very cheap year afloat for me. This year will be more expensive, and I'll explain why and what the differences are as we go through this video. I'll also point out at this early stage that, as many of you know, I say in a lot of my videos now that all I ever do here is talk about my own life and my own experience of life on the canals. Every boat is different, and I am living an extremely simple, extremely basic and a very low cost in the grand scheme of things life on a boat. There are many boats that just the boat licence alone will be almost as much as I'll spend on the entire boat for the year, for example. So these are just my experiences of living as simply and basically on a nice small boat like Tilly. So I just want to give you that sort of disclaimer as this is how I live, and as I've said again in many videos, this is my version of living on a boat. Anyway, we're not going to just look at my face, because I did a video similar to this last year where I was just stood here talking to the camera and reading figures out of my notebook, and there was a lot of me going in fact I've even got it upside down there, and basically not compelling viewing, or certainly not giving you anything that you'd want to watch. So, in just a moment, we're going to cut away to a random little boat trip.
And here we are. So then, I'm going to dive straight in. Not literally, of course. I don't know how many times I've already made that joke, but more worryingly, I'm not sure how many more times in the future I'm going to make that joke. Anyway, to the actual point of this video. So, straight into the deep end. For 2014, my total boat-related costs were £1,026 or thereabouts. So that's obviously not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things when you're considering that that's basically the cost of running my home, minus obviously sort of unrelated indirect boat costs such as food and things like that. And that is really sort of the main bulk of that is taken with the boat licence, which for 2014 on board Tilly, only a very small 30-foot narrowboat, like I say, the boat licence is charged on a per foot basis. So obviously the smaller boats are less expensive than the larger boats. And for Tilly in 2014, that came to £561.97 for the boat licence. Then on top of that, the other thing that you have to have is insurance, which again for Tilly was £102. So instantly you can see that the boat licence and the insurance are putting us up to around £664, that sort of area in the £1,026 total. So that's the main bulk taken up with the two sort of first costs that I've mentioned. After that, the biggest other cost that I had was the winter mooring fee. If you're unfamiliar with winter mooring and continuous cruising on a narrowboat, then I will post a link in the description where I talk about the rules a little bit more, and also very soon we'll be doing an updated video on the topic. But to put it very simply, if you don't have a home mooring for your narrowboat, either at a marina or other sites, then you're almost always going to be classed as a continuous cruiser. And the rules on continuous cruising are basically that you need to move from place to place, stopping at one place for no more than 14 days at a time. So there's a sort of varying definition of what a place might be, but basically you can't stop in the same sort of area for more than 2 weeks is the general gist of the rule. But winter mooring allows you to pay a fee, and again it's based on a per foot basis, so Tilly is a lot cheaper than some boats will be for winter mooring. And basically there's various rules and various places that you aren't allowed to moor on a winter mooring. But for me and my little area that I like to stop in, which is not too far away from this point, is all fine and dandy, so that's all good. And for me personally, on a narrowboat such as Tilly, I can pay for the full 5 months winter mooring. You could pay obviously for 1 month or 2 months and so on, and basically do it how you wished. But I have the full 5 months from November through to March, which is the entirety of the winter mooring period. And for Tilly, again, as I say, being only a small narrowboat, over the 2014 to 15 winter 5 months, that has cost me about £212. So instantly you can see there that boat licence, insurance and winter mooring is making up quite literally almost all of that £1,000 total. Obviously there's a few extra costs on top of that, which for me over the 2014 year, the biggest one I would say was actually buying coal. And I decided not to try and go stingy like I've been wanting to sort of live as wildly as I possibly can. That's an exaggeration and a ridiculous statement to have made. But basically, I was at one point intending to try and live as super cheaply as possible and try and use as little coal and so on. And I've got the extremely lucky break that my mum's chap is a landscape gardener. So obviously now I've got an excellent endless supply of wood and trees and cut things and old decking and goodness knows what else, which obviously when you know somebody who's got plenty of chainsaws and access to an endless amount of wood that they are literally working on themselves, that makes things a lot cheaper than it would be possibly otherwise. Well, it does make it a lot cheaper and a lot easier. I'm extremely lucky with that. But one of the things that I was thinking of doing was trying to use as little coal as possible and just use wood all the time for keeping the boat warm. And on board, again, a small boat like Tilly, it's even easier and even cheaper to keep it piping hot in there because obviously I haven't got much area to heat, and the area that you're heating above your head isn't like in a house where you've got obviously a much higher ceiling than that, so it tends to warm up a lot quicker and stay a lot warmer if you're not careful when you're stacking up the fire. So for the coal costs, I would say I've had no more than 10 bags at the absolute maximum during 2014. That's definitely the absolute maximum. It's probably maybe 7 or 8 bags that I actually used because we've had 2 mild winters, and it was only really sort of the end of December and the start of January 2015 where it got really proper cold, where you needed a lot of fuel going on the fire. So between the 2 very cheap, very mild winters, I probably had, as I say, 10 bags of coal absolute maximum, which at £9 a bag has only come to £90, again at the absolute top end of that. So again, you can see how that's been very cheap for me, and again, very fortunate and very lucky that it's worked out like that, as my first winter on board was the 2012 to 2013 year, where it was extremely cold. We had loads of really heavy snowfall, and it just caused a lot of complications, and obviously meant that the fire needed a lot more stuff going in it a lot more often because it was literally freezing outside for day after day after day after day. So yeah, as I say, that's another cost which can vary wildly just from the weather and the environment, and sometimes just the actual mooring place that you're in. I found that if I moored up where this video started, where you've got sort of a nice open field, just the sun itself can heat the boat up an awful lot with it shining on the boat all day long. Whereas if you're moored up in the middle of a load of trees and in like the sort of damp, chilly areas of the canal in the shadows, it can literally have an impact that you notice in terms of the actual fuel going on the fire. So again, £90 for that. And the final cost really, which shows how cheap and how lucky I was over 2014, was just putting a little bit of diesel in the tank really. And I cannot remember for the life of me how much went in, but basically during the summer I normally top up with about 50 quid's worth of diesel just to keep a bit topped up in the tank, so as people have said, over the winter months there isn't too much exposed metal in there, putting condensation and water into the diesel. And I really don't use the engine too much over the winter months for sort of powering the batteries for lighting and things like that, because I have a lot of LED lights and stuff on the inside that are all independently battery operated, and I don't have like tellies or any gizmos like that that drain the batteries too harshly. So again, that's something that doesn't really mean I'm using the engine all the time, all day long, like many boats do. But I normally put about 50 quid's worth of diesel in. I can't for the life of me remember this year how much diesel actually went into the tank. But I had a nice year, really, just a little bit of cruising. Went down to Whitchurch and made some terrible decisions, which saw me go all the way up to Chirk Marina, and then realised that I didn't actually want to stop in there after I'd booked the place, and then go all the way back down to Whitchurch. So ignore all that, and let's try and stay on point. So I spent about 50 quid on diesel, but while I was there, because I had a leak in my cooling system, and I still do, I got them to have a check at that at the marina, and basically discovered that it was a job that needs the boat out of the water to fix, and not sort of terrible and vital to immediately get sorted. So I've probably spent, I think it was, because they couldn't actually do anything, I got charged just a token gesture of having it looked at, which I think was about $7.99 or something in that figure. So I'm going to round the diesel and that together up to £60, which I think is overestimating it slightly. And that really all added together at the sort of top end, all of those boat specific costs for 2014, as I say, only came to about £1,026, which I'm more than happy with. Of course, on top of that, you've got all of the things that aren't specifically yearly costs, which over 2015 I'm going to have to pay. So this is where 2015 is probably going to cost me in excess of £2,000. And as I say, that then demonstrates how the difference between living on a boat and boat to boat, and even living on the same boat, can wildly vary in cost from year to year and almost moment to moment. So I need my boat safety certificate updating, which is something that happens every 4 years, just to basically check that the boat is all in good working safe order. So obviously that's things like ventilation and things like gas and things like, basically it's not a checkup of the boat itself, it's just a safety overview of, is this ventilated properly, and so on. So that's something that needs to be done every 4 years, and this year 2015 is the year for that to be done. I'm predicting that's going to cost about £150 to £200. Then I'm going to have the boat out of the water and have her hull painted black again. So that, I think, for Tilly, again, a very small boat, is going to be maybe about £600, but that's something that can easily cost well over £1,000 to be done on some of these bigger boats, such as the ones you're seeing here maybe. So instantly you can see that's £600. That's bigger than any of the previous costs at all in 2014. Then on top of that, I'll probably have to buy myself a gas bottle or two, which will be about £25 to £30 each. Then when it comes to whether I end up staying in a marina or not over the busy summer months, that for 2013 I spent 2 months in Chirk Marina, which cost me about £175 for both months combined. Again, that's a low cost compared to what a much bigger boat might cost to plant in a marina for a couple of months. And really, as I say, those are some of the things that need to be done every so often, but not specifically every year. And 2014 for me was such a cheap year because none of those associated and related costs happened in that year, whereas they're all seeming to happen in 2015, which is probably going to instantly see me spend, as I say, twice the amount of money on the actual boat itself during that year. And equally, on top of that, I'm going to obviously, while the boat's out of the water, have to have it checked and check the steel's all in good condition, and that might need a little bit of overplating with new steel at some point, so that could cost obviously an awful lot of money to do. And similarly, I'm going to have the cooling system seen to and fixed properly. So again, that'll probably cost me a few bob extra. So you could easily be looking at, I suppose, pushing towards £3,000 for the year of living on a boat in 2015. I hope it won't be that much. But as you can see, the basic principle of what I'm trying to get across is it's going to be a lot more expensive than 2014, but when you're having a cheap year like 2014 was for me, I'm putting away and saving my money for times such as this year where all of the costs are congregating in a few months period. So I hope that that's been interesting and enlightening and maybe given you a few things to think about. As I say, that's just my costs and my version of living on a boat, because there's an awful lot more that can be said and many, many more costs that could crop up related to all sorts of things. I mean, if you've got different features on your boat, then obviously something such as, let's say, I don't know, electrical systems and computers and things like that, and any fancy sort of engine work that might need to go on might be an extremely expensive thing if you have a problem with anything like that. Equally, if you haven't got those things, then you're unlikely to have to worry about paying for stuff that you don't have on board. So if that makes sense, I hope that that's at least proved slightly interesting for you. Hope you've enjoyed these little clips of boat trips as well. And I suppose I'll say thank you very much for watching. Please check out my other videos for loads more of narrowboat life and plenty more of general life outdoors, biking, walking, kayaking and going up hills. Feel free also to like the Facebook page and add me personally on Facebook and Twitter for loads of photos and general updates from life afloat. And equally, please consider checking out my books available for the Kindle. They're nice and short and all the links are in the description. Just check those out or search Amazon for The Narrowboat Lad and you're bound to find me at some point, I'm sure. And really, until the next time, have a fantastic day, keep it boat worthy, and farewell.